So with me today is Mary-Jayne Rust. Mary, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio. And you've written a book that I really enjoyed reading called Towards an Ecopsychotherapy. And we'll mainly be talking about that. But first of all, I thought it would be great to find out how you found yourself in this field, how you got here.
Well, it's a very long story how I got here. I'll try and just give you the headlines. So I grew up in the country. My dad was a miller. So I was very much embedded in the farming community. But I'd always had a very strong interest in psychology. So piece those things together and you can understand that later on, when I discovered the field of ecopsychology, I was absolutely overjoyed. But one of the things that I got very involved with being in my own therapy and training and so on. And then I went and spent some time in Ladakh, a traditional culture on the Tibetan plateau in 92 and 93. And it was there where I met someone called Helena Norberg Hodge, a Swedish woman who was had set up a green NGO looking at the rapid transition for the local people, as is happening all over the world with traditional cultures moving suddenly into Western culture and all the difficulties that happen. And she was very interested in the psychological dimension of that as well. And I stayed with her, and she's a bit of a missionary, and she pointed out all the terrible things that were happening, including glaciers melting. And I knew about that stuff, but actually it was there that it moved from my mind down into my body, and I really felt it. When I came home, I felt a bit like a cat on hot bricks. What am I to do with this information, this felt information? And in the end, I met up with a number of other therapists who felt the same way, because most of my colleagues thought I was mad at that point, because it wasn't in the news or anything, climate change. I don't know that climate change was even a word at that point. And we got together, and in a sense, that was our training together. We read together, we experimented running workshops together, we went on residentials with someone called Joanna Macy, who was still is a leader in that field, and John Seed, rainforest activist. Okay. And that just was fantastic. It was fantastic. And I knew that was my thing. And then from then on, I kind of developed it in lots of different ways. I've done lots of public speaking and run trainings and courses, and found ways to bring it into my individual therapy practice.
That's what a list of I didn't realize you'd been to Tibet, and Joanna Macy and John Seed, both people that I've very much come across in the domain of sort of climate change and ways of dealing with it emotionally, but I didn't realize that there was that strong connection in ecotherapy as well. But it would be good to get a sense of exactly what area you're specifically talking about. And in the book, you do a great job of clarifying or distinguishing between ecotherapy, the bigger field, ecopsychology, and then ecopsychotherapy. And so I was wondering if for our listeners and viewers, if you could do that same kind of clarification process.
Well, I'll start with ecopsychology, because that is really the field of study, which emerged, I would say it probably started emerging in the mid-1900s, but as an actual word, it emerged in the mid-1990s with an anthology edited by Theodore Roszak and Mary Gomes and Alan Canner. And that's still today a really well worth reading anthology, because all the chapters are written by leading thinkers in the field, and they've gone on to write books. So it's really the study and inquiry into our human relationship with the other than human world. That's it in a nutshell. And a very core belief is that we have become disconnected from the natural world. We've withdrawn, I think is probably a better word. As Western culture, of course, that's happened over millennia, or centuries. So it's a bit like frogs getting used to boiling in water, that we've got used to this disconnection and the paradigm that we are apparently separate and superior to our relatives. And ecopsychology is a response to that, and is saying, actually, it's traumatizing for humans to be so disconnected. We spent most of our life as a species embedded in nature and with an intimate knowledge of the other than human world. And suddenly, it almost like if you saw human species in a 24-hour clock, in the last second, we've lost it. And that is not just a physical impact, it impacts us psychologically and spiritually. And in fact, if you look at what happens to indigenous cultures around the world, the few of them that are left, and you hear them speaking about being torn from their land, you know that actually it drives humans mad to be torn from their land. But it's so difficult for us to see that in ourselves because there's so many other things going on. So the question for ecopsychologists is, so how do we reconnect? We're never going to go back and live as hunter-gatherers. So what does it mean to reconnect with the other than human world in our modern lives? And it's a very complex question, and I think there's lots of different answers to that. So then there's the practice of ecotherapy is the practice of ecopsychology, and there's lots of different forms of that: wilderness therapy, equine assisted therapy, horticultural therapy, actually, which has been going on for a long time. And in all of these different manifestations, it's recognizing the healing power of nature for humans, how it soothes, it gives us a form of self-soothing, it helps us become more embodied, it regulates our emotions. So in a sense, that's what horticulture therapy was all about. Just take people out into nature and get them growing their vegetables, and they will automatically get better. So ecotherapy uses that healing quality. Ecopsychotherapy is more like taking psychotherapy outdoors. Mm-hmm.